there, everybody. I'm Nicole Dean. I'm a professor at Yavapai College, and I'm here to offer you a few notes about Love's Labour's Lost, the next in the Shakespeare on Stage series. So I'm here basically to give you a little background about the play and some hints to how the play is often seen by critics and what have you. So I'm not here to offer you the final interpretation of the events of the play. That's part of what you can dig into as you're watching the play, and hopefully you'll join us for our discussion and offer some insights that you have as you watch the play. So anyway, let's get started here with just a little bit of history about the play. First of all, it is considered by scholars to be one of Shakespeare's earliest true masterpieces. The great critic Harold Bloom declared it such, and many other critics have determined that this is when Shakespeare really came into his own. In particular, the kind of wordplay, the punning, the metaphors, and what have you are really at their highest form here, and some of the elements that are typical of a Shakespeare play really come to their highest form in this play and plays that follow it. So it's considered an important play in that sense because it represents him coming into his own as a playwright. It was first performed for Elizabeth I in the mid-1590s, so this was performed directly for the Queen herself in its first iteration, and then it became a popular play after that. It actually fell out of favor for quite a while, actually. Through the 1800s, it was barely performed at all, and then it saw sort of a renaissance in the 20th century and into the 21st century when people fell in love again with some of its themes about gender and also its wordplay, its clever punning and what have you. The title has been shown in various forms in the various folios that exist, so it's not clear what was intended by Shakespeare himself. As you may know, other people wrote these down while watching the plays, so they probably didn't know exactly what Shakespeare's intention was, but the meaning of the title actually can vary depending on how it's written. Sometimes it's written without apostrophes, in other words, no possessive or contractions. Sometimes both loves and labors, as in the current standard, are used with an apostrophe S, and sometimes it's just love's labor lost with no S on the end of labor. And these change the meaning of the title just slightly because you can look at the possessive S as a possessive or the apostrophe S as a contraction. So it can be love is or loves as in a possessive. So that's an interesting point that we don't know exactly what the title is here. Interestingly also, it contains the longest scene in any Shakespeare play, the longest word, and I'm going to attempt to say this for you. It's a Latin word, honorificabilitudinitatibus, the very longest word to appear in a Shakespeare play. And the choice of that word is perfect because he's poking fun at scholars and their use of big words, and it happens to mean the ability to earn honors. So it's a big fancy word for people to use who want to earn honors. And it also includes the longest single speech in any of Shakespeare's plays. Okay, so there's a lot of the longest stuff in here. Maybe he learned how to be a little more concise as he went through the years, but it's interesting that it holds the world records for those particular categories. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the themes here. Obviously, men's desires are very important here. The whole gist of the play is that these men have sworn themselves off women in order to accomplish certain things in the world, and they fail miserably at keeping that promise. So this clearly is the focus and the irony that is being examined carefully. Certainly, Shakespeare is famous for his examinations of the contradictions in human behavior, and Men's Desire is a perfect playground for this because it's looking at their desire for status and fame and how that conflicts with desire for women and desire to control women and their influence over them. So these two things are placed into conflict. These men believe if only they can get women out of their lives, along with other things they enjoy, like food and sleep even, they can then accomplish more and gain fame. They're not interested in improving the world, they're interested in fame and status in the world. So women here are seen as deterrents to and motivations for male achievement and glory. So you can hear the conflict there. So at the same time that they're presented as deterrents to, in other words, they distract men's minds from this important work that they want to do, this scholarly work that they want to do for their achievement of fame, they're also presented in the play as the key motivation for male motivation. At one point, Baron, who is the one who resists the idea the most, he says, "From women's eyes this doctrine I divine. They are the ground, the books, the academes, from whence doth spring the true Promethean fire." So in other words, even though he's being told that women are distracting him from his accomplishments, he's also realizing that women are also what's motivating him to have passion, to move forward in life. So it's a dichotomy here, and he can't decide which one is true. And the men in the play don't know how to view women because they're simultaneously attracted to and repulsed by women. So they have this kind of conflicting inner desire for women and to get away from women at the same time. So the parallel today, and what makes this play, I think, very pertinent in today's world, is now we have the MGTOW movement, which could be seen as kind of an extreme example of the very kind of thinking that you see in these men. The idea that somehow women are responsible for everything bad in their lives, and if only they can get rid of women, then everything will be perfect. MGTOW, by the way, MGTOW, means men going their own way. And if you're not familiar with it, I don't suggest you go out there and go looking, because it can be pretty repugnant. I mean, it's quite an expression of misogyny, and basically it's blaming women for everything that's wrong in their lives, and the fact that they are not attractive to women in the way they used to be because of evil feminism and all of that. So you see the same kind of thinking in the extreme today in that MGTOW movement. Okay, and certainly general kind of misogyny is still alive and well in the world. So in fact, you might see, and some psychologists have theorized that the misogyny that's seems to be so rooted in humanity everywhere in the world, this kind of misogyny exists, that it comes from essentially this conflicting desire. In other words, if you were to put it into a single quotation, I love you so much that I hate you, that I have to hate you. I love you so much that I have to get you out of my life. I desire you so much, I must push you away. So some people have theorized that this is where misogyny comes from, and some of the more violent acts of the men's rights, in quotation marks, the MGTOW movement. Roger Elliott, you may remember, went on a shooting spree, and basically he was wanting to shoot women because he couldn't get women. So his desire drove him to want to destroy them. And it's kind of the same kind of dichotomous thinking and desire. Okay, so that leads us also to the virgin whore dichotomy. I think that sheds a little bit of light on what's going on in the play as well. The virgin whore dichotomy is essentially an either-or view of women, where they are either pure, blessed, wonderful virgins, these wonderful, spotless, lovely kind of entities, or they're the debased, dirty prostitute, these sinners that corrupt men. Okay, so these extreme polarized views of women. And I have a picture here of the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene, who in Christian tradition was turned into the prostitute figure, although she's not that necessarily in the Bible. That's what Christian tradition turned her into, because there seemed to be this need to have those polar opposites in the view of women. And you see this in the characters too, when they very quickly change their view of women. There's one point where one character literally jumps from definition. She's a virgin. No, she's a damsel. No, she's a maid. Right after each other, defining and labeling the woman with different labels, changing his mind on the spot because he can't determine, okay, what kind of woman is this? The need to label her a pure woman or not, determining what label she's going to have, and he can't seem to decide which one fits in that moment. So Freud pointed out this dichotomy long ago, and he claimed that it came from the inability to reconcile love for women with the lust for women, that these things in the psyche don't match. Perhaps because one is animalistic where the other is more spiritual in nature, and somehow in the psyche those two cannot come together for men. So you have to put them in one category of the other, the lust category or the love category. That was Freud's explanation for that. In Christianity, you see this happening where women become both life, the source of life, that is their only role in life, and also the source of eternal death, as they become responsible through Eve for all the sins of the world. So they're bringing life and bringing death. So that is that dichotomy once again. Are we supposed to value women as the bringers of life, or are we supposed to hate them as the bringers of death? It's hard to rectify these two views. Another explanation I've read from psychologists is that this comes from mothers' primary role throughout most of history as caregivers of small children. They're in a difficult position as caregivers and people who bring up children, because on the one hand, they are the protector of the child. They're the one who gives nurture. They're the one who gives food. They're the one who gives comfort. But on the other hand, they are the ones who have to say no a lot, right? They're the ones who have to wean the child away, which Freud also recognized as a traumatic moment in everyone's subconscious that they have some memory of that lingers in the psyche. And also, your mother's always the one saying no to your ego, saying, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. And then that turns in also when a young man grows up and begins to desire women sexually, that he also gets told no a lot on that realm as well. So while they are the nurturers and the givers, they are also the ones who are putting a stop to men's desires once again. So we have the idea of men's desires coming up here again, where women are always the ones getting in the way of that, whether it's a little child trying to do what it wants and being told no, 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 or it's a young woman who is rejecting the advances of a young lover. The big no comes from women a lot, as well as the care and nurture that men desire. So again, we have this uncomfortable combination of things. So take a look at that and think about that as you're listening to these men talk about women and watching women trying to navigate in that field. Okay? So you also see in this play critique of intellectualism. You'll see that very clearly. A lot of wordplay going on here, but in a way that ultimately criticizes how people use words to puff themselves up, to control others, and what have you. And intellectualism is one way that's happening. These men are scholars. They're supposed to be dedicating themselves to scholarship, But as we know, they're not doing that because they want to make the world a better place. They want to do that to get fame for themselves, get glory and honor for themselves. So basically, I think you could sum up what Shakespeare is saying here as human beings are really not rational beings. However, they may want to use their intellect, they're not purely rational. But as the famous saying goes, they're rationalizers. They're not rational, they're rationalizers. And as you'll see in the play, these men can use their intellect to rationalize anything they want in what direction, one direction or another. It doesn't really matter. They can twist the rhetoric to go in whatever direction they need it to go. So the intelligent and the educated are as subjected to self-delusion as the dumb and the uneducated. So you'll notice that there's no Forrest Gump here, who's the uneducated hero here. Both uneducated and educated people alike are seen as prideful and self-delusional. You know, both of them can convince themselves of whatever it is they want to believe. They will use their minds and their words to justify whatever they want in the world. So ego here is actually the primary motivator, not learning or human advancement. So it's seeing through the artifice of the scholarly world here, the academe, okay? So it's saying these people are actually very shallow. In spite of all their deep thinking, they're actually very shallow. Whether or not this is true still today in academe, I'll let you ask some of our panel participants. I've worked in academe most of my life. My opinion is that it's pretty much still alive and well, that ego still serves as some primary motivator. I'd like to think there's some idealistic academics out there, but I'd say ego still plays a big role. So see if what you observe here in the play is still true for people today. Okay? So also I wanted to point out a few Shakespearean motifs. These are things that are very common in Shakespeare plays, so you might as well watch for them in this play as well, because they are things that you will very commonly see in any Shakespeare play, or most Shakespeare plays. So first of all, wordplay. That's extremely prominent in this particular play. All sorts of plays on words, all sorts of puns, all sorts of metaphors, all sorts of similes. Okay, so that's why I recommend, in addition to watching it, go ahead and read it on the page if you have a chance. Because sometimes, especially if you have the footnotes available, you will be able to appreciate the richness of all the wordplay that happens in this play. It's almost every line. It's amazing, actually. It's a punster's dream world here. So lots of wordplay going on, as there are in many Shakespeare plays. And there's also the play within the play. So look for that. That is very typical in almost all Shakespeare plays, where you have us watching the play and a play is going on inside that play. So it's an interesting awareness of the audience watching the play and watching the people in the play watch the play. So Shakespeare loved to play with that idea, and he does here as well. And there's also something called the aside, and that's essentially what's known in movie making as the breaking of the fourth wall, where the actor will turn to the audience and begin to speak to the audience. You'll see that here too. And it's an interesting convention because it allows the character to make observations about what's going on in the play and observations about other characters without other characters knowing he or she is doing that. So it gives a whole other dimension to the character speaking and to the other characters acting in the play. Okay, so look for that as well. It's called the aside. Also, there's costume and role switching. That happens also in a lot of Shakespeare plays. Most of the Shakespeare plays, or many of the Shakespeare plays, have gender role reversal using costume switching. So in other words, women will get into men's clothes and men will get into women's clothes. Here we have a group of women switching their clothes around so that women of high estate become women of low estate, and lower ranking women become higher ranking women. So their ranking is played with, and that becomes part of the way they manipulate and interact with the men in the play. Okay, so look for those four motifs. That's common to a lot of Shakespeare plays, and I think you can get some good examples here in this particular play. And that's all for now. Hopefully that's enough to get you started. You're welcome to email me if you have any questions, or just wait until our little discussion. I'll be there as well, and I hope you have some interesting insights to share, or just some reactions to share about what you've watched. I'd especially be interested to know, how relevant is this to you as a modern viewer of this very old play? Okay, so I'll see you then. Thank you very much.